Hello, everybody. Welcome to the media show at Pod TV Network. I'm Nick Palavita. I will be your guest today, or excuse me, your host today, as we're going to explore the media and, of course, Donald Trump. On some of our previous shows, there's some very interesting things about Donald. And one of them is, of course, his relationship with Elon Musk that now has taken over Twitter, and also the advent of social media. And social media is big here in Europe. As it is around the world. And we're broadcasting, of course, and I'm broadcasting out of Barcelona. We're going to bring in people from the United States and people from around the world on this broadcast. First of all, the person who has over 100 years of broadcasting experience will be joining us. He's Mark Lee, who's seen on many of the shows. Of course, I've seen Mark on a lot of the shows on the Pod TV network, which has over 2.3 million viewers in 2023. Hopefully, we'll be able to increase that number in 2024. Bring in Adam Lamparero, who's a professor at Georgia College, who will hopefully be able to increase our numbers. And of course, Shaquille Latner's in the background in Australia, as I have no idea what time it is over there. I can tell you over here it's 6 p.m. for what it's worth. But let's talk about Donald Trump and the media. How much impact did Twitter have in this election? So I'll start with Adam because I know he follows this. Being a legal professor, I'm sure that the thing you want to do is follow the media. But really, did Elon have an impact on this election, and will he have an impact on a going forward basis?
Yes, social media had a significant impact, particularly among Generation Z voters who went +8 for Donald Trump in an interesting coalition that included Latinos, African Americans, and women who went for Trump by 7 points. But the mainstream media was Trump's biggest asset because of their bias, both during the presidential debates, during interviews, and during their day-to-day coverage. 85% of the coverage of Donald Trump was negative. 75% of the coverage of Kamala Harris was positive, and the American public could see right through it. Let's take an example. The vice presidential debate, when Margaret Brennan tried to fact check J.D. Vance when they had agreed that there was going to be no fact checking. The bias was palpable. Let's look at the interviews between Dana Bash at CNN with Kamala Harris and with J.D. Vance. She treated Kamala Harris with kid gloves and treated J.D. Vance like he was her worst enemy. And you look at the day-to-day coverage, like I said, 85% negative on Trump. The media distorted facts. They distorted reality, and they thought the American public were so dumb they wouldn't see through it. They did, and they gave the proverbial middle finger to the media when they elected Trump. He swept all the swing states and won the popular vote.
Hey, Adam, by that same token and everything, I was having the pleasure, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, of watching some of the more liberal kind of social media and everything. So I've definitely in the past watched Midas Touch, and I was actually watching an interview with Pod Saves America and some of the others that are more liberal. And one of the arguments that they brought up, and I don't know whether you would agree with them or not, is that for several years now, the right media, or the media that is leaning more right, has been in control of the narrative in the sense of who is in control of being popular. Joe Rogan is definitely seen as conservative, and I think that the gentleman from Pod Saves America says that 6 out of the 10 most popular podcasts are definitely leaning conservative and all along those lines. And that can be said not just here in the United States, but around the world and everything. And they were thinking that the those that are on the left or the progressive side don't have that same kind of infrastructure, or have not put it together as well as they probably could or should and everything. So is that a legitimate argument that they are making in your mind and everything? Like I said, I watched this interview and that was part of their frustration.
Yes, because the Democrats thought the way to the White House was through knocking on doors and through a biased mainstream media. The Republicans realized that social media was the ticket, and they were right. As far as Joe Rogan goes, Joe Rogan, traditionally a Democrat, endorsed Trump the night before the election. Why? Because Trump spent 3 hours answering his questions, and Kamala Harris wouldn't appear, just like she wouldn't appear at the Al Smith dinner, and just like she wouldn't appear for really any interviews in the first 40 days of her campaign. But the media thought they could ride bias and distortion of reality and facts and support Harris to the White House. But when you have 85% negative coverage of Trump, when you have biased moderators at the presidential and vice presidential debate, when you have coverage so slanted that it eschews any nuance and is a paradigmatic example of favoritism of one candidate, you have a recipe whereby older women, African Americans, Latinos, Gen Z voters, and women in the suburbs will go for Trump. They did that. He wins the popular vote and gets 300 electoral votes.
Shaquille has joined us. Tell your hand, Rick, but Shaquille, you brought this up a couple of times on other shows and other things that we've been part of and everything. I'm just wondering, do you think that the center right is doing a better job than the center left of framing their conversations in media? Because even there in Australia, it's my understanding, and I don't know enough about it, even though I've watched a few of your shows or their shows. Turning Point, Australia is similar to Turning Point USA and definitely leans more center right. So is the center right doing a better job than the center left of reaching out to the media through alternative media?
Well, let's just define what we're talking about when we say centre right. It would appear that Turning Point Australia is more on the right. I'll grant you that. But just like what you said with Joe Rogan wasn't on the right. Joe Rogan just a few years ago said he didn't even want to give Donald Trump a platform and didn't want to interview him. So what's changed? It's the same thing as what I keep saying. I'm a more classical kind of liberal kind of guy, which means I want government to not play too big a role in our lives. And I don't want to see corporations manipulate the process by having government do their bidding for them so that they end up with virtually monopoly-type arrangements over industries. Let's be honest about the situation in your country and in mine, but we'll focus on America for the moment. Let's be honest about the situation. You've got your food supply controlled by 4 or 5 companies. Yes, you've got family farms, but those farms are largely under what I consider to be very unfair contracts, and it's dominated by 4 or 5 companies. Your grocery stores are provided by 4 or 5 companies. You've got 4 or 5 major airlines. You've got insurance companies. What have you got? The major 4 or 5 companies, banks, major 4 or 5 banks. The media is controlled. Something like 90% of media is controlled by 7 companies around the world. So this consolidation that we're seeing, that's not capitalism. That's not the Adam Smith invisible hand type capitalism where, the bloke wants to be a butcher, so he sets up a butchery shop down the road, and, there's a family that sets up a fruit and veggie stall and all that sort of stuff. That's not what we're seeing. We're seeing these major corporations be able to force competition out of the market by use of government power. So when you say centre-right, I think it's worth recognising that many of the people that are being associated with centre-right are formerly on the left. Joel Jamal from Turning Point Australia, he is somebody who was a Bernie bro. So are many of the others that are on there, right? Joe Rogan, if I recall, was a Bernie bro. And Bernie himself, look at what happened to him. He was just, the hard left of the Democrats just pushed him out. Now you've got a situation where you've got a Kennedy, the son of Robert F. Kennedy, the nephew of JFK, was unceremoniously kicked out of the Democrats or pushed out of the Democrats. Okay, so centre right, no, I'm not going to go with that. Actually, I think it's where most people are. Most people are fairly moderate. Most people are perhaps centre right on the issues of government not being too big in their lives, and they're centre left on some social issues. We want to see fairness. We want to make sure that everybody has rights that are respected and are treated, essentially equally. Right, that's what most people want. Most people want to know that their fellow person is able to afford to pay their bills and, have a decent life. I don't consider all that to be centre-right, but the left of the political arena around the world has gone so far left that anything that you say is going to be considered on the right. And that's why I think that those podcasts are getting so many views. I mean, I personally have had 2.5 million views just in the last handful of weeks by appearing on some of those podcasts. And, the people that are watching them aren't all hard right-wing nut jobs, not at all.
Yeah, and Mark, Mark, one thing I'd like to say is that if you looked at the liberal commentators, and I'm a moderate, if you look at the liberal commentators over the weekend, what did they say? They said the reason Trump won was because of the economy. You have an economy where the top 1% are making most of the wealth, even though they're paying about 50% of the taxes. And 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you see higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, unaffordable housing due to inflation, that is a recipe for taking out the incumbent. It's a recipe for change. And that's exactly what happened. And what the Democrats absolutely failed to realize. That's why Trump's in office. And that's why you saw a coalition like you've never seen before of diverse populations going for Trump when they hadn't before. The next 4 years will be better than the last 4.
Have a look at what we've heard from mainstream media, right? We've heard, I'll be very quick to Toby.
Yeah, and Rick, your friend Jimmy Kimmel is crying on his show, which is a perfect example of how slanted and skewed our media has become.
Have a look at what we've seen with mainstream media.
Okay.
We've had people come out and say things like, well, why did they win the women's vote? Oh, well, it was internalized misogyny. You know, it was racism, it was sexism, it's all these other things. But the one thing it couldn't possibly be was that the Democrats were out of touch. Then they say things like, oh, maybe Joe Biden should have stood aside earlier. You think? See, but when people were saying that, they were labelled, and forget about that, okay, let's say I'm a far right-wing nut job, right? I don't know why you conclude that, but let's just say that that's true, right? People who are Democrats would say that, and they were pushed out. Like, oh, no, you know, you're being too conspiratorial, you're right-winger, you're this, you're that, you're a pearl clutcher, you're a bedwetter, blah, blah. When the whole world could see there was a problem. Then after the event, they're like, oh, well, maybe we should have done that. It was Biden's fault. It's George Clooney's fault. It's Taylor Swift's fault because she didn't do a concert. It's Beyonce's fault because she didn't perform at the rally. No, you had $1 billion, you spent it, you wasted the money, right? You've got $20 million that she has to pay now that the vendors are afraid they're not going to get paid, which is pretty typical of how Democrats spend money. It's not theirs. They spend it on crap that doesn't work. And then they come to the rest of us and say, oh, well, you know what? You should pay more taxes. Why? So that they can go and piss it up against the wall? I don't think so.
Toby, and then Rick.
So just a point of clarification, for a lot of things that were just said were pretty much untrue. Donald Trump is already well known for not paying his bills. He actually couldn't go to a few cities because those cities are still owed money.
Okay, start insulting Trump again. Here we go.
Yeah, we're talking about government policy. He wants to bring up business deals 20 years ago.
This is why we have a problem on this network when you guys just want to interrupt others that disagree with you. So please sit back, relax. Let me finish my talk.
You interrupt me all the time.
I did not interrupt you, Adam. I raised my hand the whole time. So please.
Toby, what are you so worried about? We're leaving the network anyway. What are you so worried about?
My point, but yet you're talking over me. So
go ahead.
Go
ahead.
I know you didn't say anything to Kimberly when she interrupted me on the other show. I know you didn't say anything about that, did you?
So again, you're just going to sit here and talk the whole time? Can I talk?
Go ahead.
Is it my turn?
Yes.
Thank you. So again, just a point of clarification for a few things that were just said that were untrue. Talking about, oh, well, Democrats don't pay their bills. That's incorrect. Again, Donald Trump could not rally in particular cities because those cities are still owed money that Donald Trump has not paid. He's very well known for that. In terms of Biden dropping out earlier, that has been a complaint from the start. Hence the reason they talked about she's only been in the race for 100 days. So that has been there for a very long time. And people had already talked about that. Even after the first debate, people had said he should go. He should have dropped out. Even before, there were a few that were actually talking about that. In terms of the center left, RFK was never center left. RFK has always been a conspiratorial individual who was never considered to be a part of the left or considered to be, this major running person in the Democrat Party. He was never that because he was he ran the anti-vax movement. So to say that, they pushed out RFK, they pushed out Joe Rogan, who already claims that he's a libertarian and all this other stuff. He's center left. No, what it is you're coming up with all these other extra excuses, which are trying to justify that and to point out the realities of the situation. If we're talking about the economy, which that was the quote unquote major issue, only one individual actually put out economic plans. Only one. Only one actually had an economic plan that got judged by the economists that was the cheaper of the two plans. So when we're talking about, oh, well, it's the economy, there is nothing Donald Trump put forth that would lower gas prices, that would lower all this stuff that was the complaint. The inflation was already moving down. So what people voted on were myriad of other issues. But yes, saying that the economy is easy, but it truthfully wasn't if you look at the actual data. Because again, one person put out a plan, the other person said they have tariffs. Both ideas were actually analyzed by economists. One was actually sitting at 1.7 trillion adding to the debt. The other is upwards of 5.8 trillion. So it wasn't the economy. There were other issues in play. Also, talking about a group of a very well diverse group of individuals that voted for Donald Trump, so on and so forth. Hence the reason why 92% of African Americans voted for Kamala Harris. Are you saying that we're not included in that diverse movement? Because only 8% really, well, 12% at a max went for Donald Trump.
25% of black men in
No.
Georgia.
25% didn't. Look at the data. So again, look at the data. So again, there was a large percentage that went for Kamala Harris. There were more center-right Republicans that went for Kamala Harris. There weren't really center-left. There weren't really the center-left because Gabby Gibbard, what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard left the party a long time ago. She's been on Fox News. She was never center-left. So again, all these things, we're coming up with excuses. The point being, Donald Trump has won. What are we going to look like moving forward? That's the big question on the floor.
I can tell you what we'd all be hoping for. We're all hoping that people like yourself continue going down the path that you're going down on, because that way what we'll see is the same sort of result in the midterms and the same sort of result in 2028. Okay, because it's a refusal to acknowledge anything. It's a refusal to accept any kind of feedback, refusal to accept any kind of criticism or any kind of thing that you go, okay, well, look, maybe I don't agree, but we'll course correct, nothing like that. So let's just get into a couple of things that you said there. So according to you, Hillary Clinton, according to you, Kamala Harris released an economic plan. And Donald Trump didn't. You went to Donald Trump's website and it just said tariffs. And the economists, only one group of economists in the whole world did a review, and they reviewed Kamala Harris's plan. Nobody ever reviewed Donald Trump's plan because he only had a plan of tariffs. If that's what you believe, if that's what you're trying to suggest to the viewers, if that's what you're trying to suggest to the viewers, are you talking over me again, Mr. Sensitive?
So please,
are you talking over me again, Mr. Sensitive?
I am, because you're trying to quote me, but you're quoting me wrong.
All right. So Nicholas and Mark, I just want you to make note again that when he misquotes me and I try to say something, I get muted or taken backstage. But when he doesn't, it's okay. The audience can see it. That's all good. So what we see is this kind of analogy that goes on, ignoring all of the economists that actually said that Donald Trump's plan was better. Okay, so you know what we're seeing is this very, very biased coverage. And you just brought up that she took the majority of the black vote. Yes, she did, but the percentage of the black vote that she got declined from what it was in 2020. Okay, the percentage of the vote that she got in almost every key demographic declined from what it was in 2020. In fact, Donald Trump has performed better across every major demographic than any other Republican since I don't even know when, for decades. And this is the first time that a Republican has won the popular vote since, would it be George W. Bush after 9/11?
It's probably George Bush. Just really quickly, because I think
so we're talking about a pretty significant win, and the best a Democrat can come up with is, well, you know, sexism, it's racism. It wasn't the economy. It wasn't all the things that they were telling us about prior to the election, and it's not all the things they tell us about after the election. It must be all this other stuff. Well, keep going like that and see how you go in the midterms.
No, hold on a second.
Just a point of information. According to Al Jazeera, who we do rebroadcast on Al Jazeera, so a lot of people who watch Al Jazeera will see our show. According to them, not according to Jatovi, who probably misquoted the facts once again, Trump won 20% of the black vote.
How many did
I don't
According
want
to-
to make excuses. I don't want to
According to
Daily
Toby,
Diversion.
Right, let me-
12%.
I don't want to make excuses for the Democrats. Shaq is right. Democrats lost support in every demographic. Massive failure of the Democrats. And so we're going to see a pendulum. So, I mean, it was a resounding Republican victory, but not right now.
Little landslide.
They're still counting votes. Trump has 50.4% of the votes. Harris has 48% of the votes. So we're a pretty equally divided country.
Well,
But-
Rick, you didn't
Hold
say
on,
that
hold
after
on,
the
hold on,
2020
hold on.
election.
What?
You didn't say that after the 2020 elections when it was a similar sort of margin, and you certainly didn't say that with Hillary Clinton, right? So it's changing the goalposts that we're talking about. It got the popular vote after Democrats start saying that.
Let me say what I'm going to
Finish.
say. It's a pendulum where, Obama had all three, had the whole government. He had the House, the Senate, the presidency. For 2 years. That's what Trump is going to have. Trump had the same thing in 2016. And Trump pushed through a tax cut, pushed through a bunch of judges. Obama pushed through Obamacare. So what we're going to see is Trump has 2 years to push through whatever he can get through. And, if Jimmy Kimmel's going to get choked up, and he gets choked up pretty easily, it's because he's afraid that there are going to be some excesses in what the Republicans push through. That's what happens when you own the government for a couple of years, and then
I didn't see anybody. I didn't see anybody on Fox getting choked up when Joe Biden won the election. I didn't see Gutfeld coming out and crying. But here's a question for you about the majority that. Here's the question for you about the majority that Biden's going to have.
Let me finish my. Kimmel gets choked up a lot. When I worked on the show, we would we wouldn't bet money, but we would bet at certain points in the script, he's going to get a little choked up. It's what he does. I mean, it's notable, but it's not like completely unusual for him. And we are going to be living under complete Republican domination, except they don't have a supermajority in the Senate.
Which is my question. Which is my question for you, right? Now that he has a majority in the Senate, as well as he's likely to have the majority in the House of Representatives, can I assume then that now Democrats don't think it's such a great idea to end the filibuster? You quite like having the filibuster now because it means that minority voices are heard in the Senate? Would that be a fair? Yeah. Yes. And what about stacking the Supreme Court? Now that the Republicans are in charge, would you guys support the Republicans saying, well, look, actually, we're only in charge for the next 2 years. We should add another 5 seats to the Supreme Court and add justices to it. I assume that you don't think that stacking the Supreme Court is such a good idea anymore, right?
Right.
So that's what we're talking about, is the sheer hypocrisy and lunacy that comes from the left.
That's incorrect.
What
do you mean it's incorrect? Don't tell me how we feel it's incorrect.
Let's listen to Toby.
Both parties
So
are.
Adam was next, and I'll go right after
Let me
Adam.
just say one sentence, which is both sides are hypocritical, and so.
Yeah, but you'll acknowledge, right, that you don't want to end the filibuster now.
Let him go.
I just said that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right. But Kamala Harris, when I brought this up a few months ago, Kamala Harris said that she was going to force the Green New Deal through by ending the filibuster in order to force the Green New Deal through, meaning that minority voices in the Senate wouldn't be heard. Now, yes, she did. Now, I assume the Democrats are like, oh, thank goodness the filibuster still exists.
She did not say that in this campaign election. She said that in 2019. Adam, take it away. I'll come right after you. I'm sorry.
Jacoby is correct that Kamala Harris had a plan. She had a perfect plan on how to lose an election. Number one, flip-flopped on every position she previously held as late as 2019, whether it was fracking, whether it was defunding the police, whether it was defunding ICE. I mean, she supported the bail fund for the Minneapolis rioters, and then suddenly she's all pro-police and pro-securing the border. No credibility. Second, What did Kamala Harris and Joe Biden do in the 3.5 years that they had in office when inflation rose to 9.1%? People were struggling at the grocery store and the gas pump and couldn't afford housing, and border crossings were up to 2.2 million a year starting in 2022. Absolutely nothing. Once again, a credibility problem. So what do you get? You get a coalition of diverse people across racial lines that went for Trump, and that's why he won the popular vote. And the other thing you get is Jimmy Kimmel crying and Oprah Winfrey saying, if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, you may never get to cast another ballot again. That, in a nutshell, is what was wrong with the Democratic Party and their strategy. Trump, 4 more years.
All right, since I'm glad I let you go first, Adam, because again, I'm good to respond to you as well as some of the other stuff.
I can go again. You don't have to talk if you don't want to.
Don't worry. I got your list of what exactly you said, so I'm going to respond directly to you on this one, Adam. Because
Okay.
what you said, you had 3 topics that you talked about, which flip-flopping, immigration, and celebrities crying. So let me point out, flip-flopping. Donald Trump hated EVs in 2024. Elon Musk gave him money. Donald Trump, in a campaign speech, said, I now like EVs because Elon Musk gave me money. So talk about flip-flopping. And then on top of that, when the Florida abortion discussion came into play, when that topic came up, Donald Trump flip-flopped 3 different times within 48 hours on the discussion of abortion. So Donald Trump also flip-flopped on cryptocurrency. 2016, Donald Trump hated crypto. 2020, Donald Trump hated crypto. The crypto bros gave into his campaign in 2022. And guess what? Donald Trump in 2023 switched and said, hey, I like crypto. Let's work together. So talk about credibility. You have nothing there. Immigration, first bill that
74 million voters would disagree with you.
No. It's because it was already baked in. We already understand.
Oh, okay. It was already baked in.
It is. It's already baked in. Donald Trump did everything wrong all the way.
Let me
down
guess. It was racism and misogyny that cost him the election.
Finish and talk right back to. I mean, you're getting upset. I know you're getting triggered because
We're not getting upset. What do you think the reasons are? Is it racism and misogyny?
You're wrong. You're talking over me. Wrong. Let me finish this out real quick. So, all right, go get your Happy Meal.
More fries.
More fries. That's
Yeah,
right.
I'm about as triggered as Jimmy Kimmel and Oprah.
So again, in terms of immigration, immigration was one of the first bills that they put forth. The best thing for immigration is to go through legislation. If you don't go through legislation, everything gets tied up in the courts. In immigration, in 2019, there was actually a spike that was beginning. Hence the reason you had throughout the whole caravan of migrants that was coming from Donald Trump. That was his big push. Well, what ended up happening is Donald Trump tried to stop that with an executive order. That executive order was challenged in the actual courts and was getting struck down. Then in 2020, immigration disappeared. Why? Not because of anything Donald Trump did. It was because of COVID, because then we had the actual situation where people could not move, could not cross. Nobody was going anywhere. So therefore, once COVID was lifted, the actual remain in Mexico, all these other bills and everything else that they tried to put forth to force people to stay across the border based on health and COVID, that got struck down by the courts. So that wasn't there. And then Mexico even said, we're not doing remain in Mexico anymore. Therefore, you cannot have that. So to have anything, you have to have legislation. We all agree. You two are lawyers. You, Adam, and Nick, you all understand that there needs to be a better process for processing these individuals. The big problem with immigration is that people overstay their visas and not the actual border crossings. That's where the big issue is. And if we cannot fix this issue, it is going to constantly be an issue, which Donald Trump actually blocked something that was going to help with the issue. So you had Kamala Harris and Joe Biden put forth a bill, then it gets struck down by the Republicans in the House. Then in 2023, 2024, they put forth a bill. Donald Trump says, I want to campaign on this. It gets struck down. So again, this is that double standard and people baking it into the cake. Then we go to
All right, so
celebrity
can I
crime.
respond? How
And
long does
celebrity
Yeah, I think you've gone long
I'm
enough. Haven't you?
responding. I'm responding. I'm
Let's
trying to finish. You guys keep interrupting, and that takes
Oh,
a
for
lot
goodness
longer when I do
sake.
that.
Yeah,
So,
because you're going on for
again,
8 minutes.
No, I'm not going on for 8 minutes. I'm actually going on for 5, my normal 5.
Too
So if you
much.
could just
Oh,
sit back and
five
wait.
minutes.
So again, in terms of celebrities crying, January 6th was an insurrection based on what Donald
It
Trump
was not an
did.
insurrection.
It was an insurrection, and this is why, again, you getting triggered and trying to overtalk and gaslight. It was an insurrection, and that happened on Donald Trump's watch, and that was not celebrities crying or tearful. That was actually people breaking into the U.S. Capitol. The first time ever the Confederate flag was in the U.S. Capitol was on January 6th, the insurrection of Donald Trump.
An insurrection that
Stop, Adam. Let's let
You finished. Hang on.
You
I
don't
was
get
going to
to
wake up
dictate.
again.
I
Sorry.
can't
You
respond to
finished,
this.
haven't you? Okay. Excellent.
Factually inaccurate statements. Number one, Joe Biden reversed several executive orders that made it easier for immigrants to come into this country illegally.
I didn't say that. I
And
said
if you
a bill.
look at the statistics, even by your own standards, the Washington Post, border crossings doubled and reached their highest in 2022 under Joe Biden, and they were directly caused by him reversing those executive orders. Okay, that's number one.
That was a migration.
Number two, as far as insurrection goes, you might be referring to the Colorado Supreme Court, which in a 4-3 decision by a very liberal majority found that he had violated the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by committing an insurrection. 9-0, the Supreme Court reversed. You even had Ketanji Brown Jackson, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan on that side. It was not an insurrection, and Congress is the only entity that has the right to define if it was. So your subjective definition of insurrection is just about as subjective as your interpretation of data regarding the border to fit your narrative. Biden and Harris caused inflation. They caused an increase in border crossings. And she tried to run on a record that was inconsistent with what she did, and that's why she lost. Now, I'll stop because I'm going to be reasonable. And I'm sorry for triggering you and Jimmy Kimmel, too, by the way. I hope he's gotten some tissues.
I'd like to point something out.
Rick has had his hand up.
I'd like to point something out about the immigration bill that everyone says Donald Trump blocked. Let's just remember that immigration bill, what it did, two things. One, is it actually exacerbated the same problem, and it meant that the bill would be binding in such a way that Donald Trump couldn't do anything about it if he became the president. Hence the reason why even people like Bernie Sanders voted against it. So unless you're trying to say that Bernie Sanders has now jumped on the MAGA bandwagon, which probably he should, by the way, he should, because
Bernie
keeping
Sanders
government
said
in
it's the
control,
economy's stupid, not
keeping
misogyny.
government under control is actually something that Bernie Sanders stands for. But unless you're going to suggest that he's now MAGA, perhaps you can have a look a little bit closer to home. All right, it was a terrible bill. And you bring up about the overstaying of visas. Yes, that is a problem. But the fact that that is a problem doesn't mean that America should say, well, because we have a problem over here, let's just let millions and millions of people. You've had allegedly almost the population of Australia move into the United States. Are you serious? What the hell's wrong with you guys? You think it's amusing, but I can tell you what, most of your country people don't think it's amusing, and that's why your party lost. And this kind of attitude of yours is exactly why you're going to lose again in 2016 and in 2028. Lastly, I'm going to say this. If you want to know what the effect is, you only have to have a look at the UK and Australia, right? Where now our politicians that have been acting out of control with all this transgender nonsense and all this other stuff, we're going to pass a bill on misinformation. Now, all of a sudden, they're like, oh, if America did that, what does our elections look like next time around? Maybe we need to back off a little bit. So what you're now seeing, thank goodness for the United States, thank goodness that Americans have come to their senses, because now your allied countries in the Western speaking world, the Five Eyes nations, are now looking at America and going, yeah, okay. And I can tell you, I just did a speech just recently where I said, it's our country, these are our rights, we need to take them back. And I got an absolute round of applause, standing ovation from that audience, because people are fed up. But you sit there and laugh, champ. You'll be crying again at the next election like you were this one.
All right, my turn. I think it's okay to change your mind. It's not always frickin' flip-flopping. Like, I thought that puberty blockers were okay because I was told by the scientists that they don't cause any harm. I'm changing my mind because the science now says that, yeah, they do cause permanent harm in some people. I changed my mind. Now with fracking, like I wish she'd offered like a little bit of an explanation. It's like, I know fracking, and fracking is fine in places where you're not next to where people live, because you're injecting this nasty fluid into the ground to release natural gas. Do it where people don't live, that's fine. Just don't do it where people live and it F's up their water.
So, Rick, you are spot on with that.
That's assuming
It
it
is
screws
okay
up the
to
water.
change your mind, and that is what people are allowed to do. Hence the reason it's okay for a voter to go from, hey, look, I voted for Obama back then and changed my mind to vote for this person now. That's what we all do. When we become and we listen to and decide for ourselves what we want to do, that is okay to do that. But let's get back to the reality. You're spot on again. Flip-flopping and changing your mind because you get more data, because now you have, as you pointed out, you have you're now a little bit more sensitive towards puberty blockers and feel like there's an issue there. But that's based on science. That's based on growth. What Donald Trump did in terms of flip-flopping, hey, I give you money, now I like your product. That is exactly what he did. That is flip-flopping. That is the definition of flip-flopping, the corruption that we complain about all the time. So when we're talking about flip-flopping, what Kamala Harris did, you're right, Rick. And this is the problem with the Democrat Party, is they have a problem messaging. They always have a problem messaging. She should have done a better job talking about her educated belief now and understanding of the whole situation around fracking and utilizing that as a transition as we move forward towards a clean energy lifestyle, because that is what fracking is, and that is what actually our using less and less oil. That's how we get rid of fossil fuels, is have that transition piece to go there. And that is what that fracking is. So had she been able to explain that better, I think she would have fared better. But nobody cared about that.
You can't have another 5 minutes.
Let me finish. I'm not taking 5 minutes. I'm actually trying to finish up real fast if you wouldn't interrupt me. So in terms of that changing, nobody asked about the changing of, hey, Elon paid him money, now he likes EVs. That's extremely transactional. That was already baked in because people already know he is transactional. Hence the reason why people are very afraid of what things are going to take place. And in terms of the immigration bill, it was not bad. Please don't say that. It was actually written by James Lankford. It was a very conservative bill, which actually took, HR 2, which was the bill that the Republican House had really tried to push through. It actually had some more restrictions than the HR 2 and some less restrictions than HR 2. The big complaint was, oh, well, it put a 5,000 person cap on there. Well, right now there is no cap. So that's an improvement if you really say anything. So again, it was a very conservative bill. Yes, Bernie Sanders didn't like it. Why? Because he's way on the other side. He's far on the left. Arguing that, oh, well, because Bernie Sanders didn't like it, that means he's MAGA. No, it was because he had his positions as well. It was very conservative. So it was a fine bill.
All right. Let's
it was an omnibus bill.
Right.
It was an omnibus bill with a lot of ridiculous provisions in it, and the $5,000 cap. Oh, that's nice. Let's just have
there was no $5,000 cap.
Now, as far as
and then it doesn't even.
You say democratic messaging was the problem, as if the problem wasn't Kamala Harris and her complete lack of substance, her failure to justify any of her repeated flip-flops. They weren't based on new data. They were based upon the fact that she just started running for president and realized those positions would not be tenable. And then you look at her record in the last 3.5 years, and it bore no resemblance to the policies that she endorsed while vice president, but now suddenly disavowed as the presidential candidate. She had no credibility, and that swath of voters, Black, Hispanic, women, including suburban women, and young Generation Z voters, why did they all increase for Trump? To ask the question is to answer it. Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate. It wasn't the messaging, it was the messenger.
Let me come in on something. I
sorry,
find
Rick
it
Andrews,
fascinating that what we go for it, Jacoby. Jeez,
No,
go
Rick
on
had
then.
his hand
No,
up, so I'm
go on,
sorry.
go on.
Well, let Shaq go. Let Shaq
Yeah,
go, and then
go.
I'll go.
Jeez. So, 5,000 person cap, after which the government they're not forced to, but they can close the border. Where the issue is, the complaint is that they don't have the ability to close the border. So what are you even talking
That's
about?
some bill.
Right? So it's silliness. The second thing, you talk about Elon Musk. Yes, absolutely. Elon Musk has managed to win over Republican support for his position, and some of that probably is opportunistic. But let's just remember that when the Democrats were in power, well, they still are in power, they had some renewable, or electric vehicle summit or something, and they excluded Elon Musk from it, right? Because just like this network excludes me from the economic show, given that I'm the person who's actually got qualifications in that thing, because they don't like what you say, you get excluded, right? And lastly, messaging's a problem. Messaging's a problem. Well, they've got MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, etc., the Washington Post, the New York Times, the LA Times. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, name all the major media outlets of your country and the world, right? So how come they've got a messaging problem when they have all of these amazing media personalities that know so much about the media? How come they have a messaging problem? What else do they need? You had $1 billion. You outspent Donald Trump by 3-1. You've got all the media on your side. You've had everything. And the bottom line is that you people will sit there and go, oh, well, it's such a racist country. It's the same racists that voted for Obama that now didn't vote for Kamala Harris, so it must be racism. It's the same Republicans that vote for female governors in their states that are so misogynistic that they won't vote for a female to be president. The same sort of thing, right? It's ludicrous. And the fact that you guys can't be honest with yourselves and admit that is exactly the reason why you're going to keep losing.
Let me be honest. Let me be honest. When Biden was the candidate, we were afraid he would say, he'd stumble over his words and say something stupid. When Harris was the candidate, we were afraid that she, being relatively inexperienced, would say something stupid. You guys were saying we need more press conferences from you guys. And I, as a good liberal, was saying, no, we're getting away with it. Let's just not, because it's risky. And it turns out we weren't getting away with it.
But your words that those numbers were showing. But also I want to say to you, Rick, you brought up the thing about the trans stuff, and you said, look, you believed the science, and then you changed your mind. Okay? Look, I'm not anti-trans. Well, we had this conversation before. I'm not anti-trans. It's a very difficult issue. And I think the parents that are dealing with this have a very difficult time. And people need to be dealt with compassion and shown love and everything else, right? They shouldn't be ostracized from society because they're going through an issue. However, the real issue isn't about, to me, and I don't know how Adam feels, the real issue isn't actually about puberty blockers in and of themselves. The issue is about whether or not we're able to have a conversation about it, whether or not we're able to question the scientific evidence that's being used. For example, we know the pharmaceutical companies often release reports, and this is something that's a left position, by the way. It's not even a right-wing position. The left-wing position of pharmaceuticals used to be that we're very, very concerned when pharmaceutical companies commission studies that they pay for, and the studies tend to slant into their favor to say that there is great efficacy and safety to their drugs, right? And we get concerned about that. So in the past, we would always question that. What we have seen happen over, especially the last decade, is any kind of questioning of the orthodoxy causes you to be shut down, causes you to potentially lose your job, causes you to have people say, oh, look, you liked a post 20 years ago, so therefore I'm going to dob you into your employer and hopefully get you sacked. That's the sort of thing that we're saying. And that's what people are reacting to, especially in academia, but elsewhere as well. That's exactly what people are actually responding to. So as for the science, as I've said before, the science has reached a point, and, where and I hope university students are watching this, because the science has reached a point now where when you go to university, if you want to do a study or you want to do some research, you have to get funding for that research. And you're unlikely to get funding unless you're going to do something which slants to the left. If you want to do a right-wing thing, for example, I've been saying this since I've been on this network for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been saying it for the last 10 or more years. We know that there has been a massive drop in testosterone levels in the population of Western countries. Why? Surely there might be a problem there. We haven't done a single study that I'm aware of that says, what if we use testosterone replacement therapy as a way to improve outcomes for men? And what does the left say? Well, that's a good thing because it gets rid of toxic masculinity, despite the fact that we're losing birth rates and all sorts of other things that are going wrong. Now, with women, we know that hormone replacement therapy, especially when they're going through menopause, can be a good thing, okay? But we can't do that sort of a study. We're now beginning to see testosterone levels drop in animals that don't live in the wild, animals that we are responsible for feeding and looking after. Is that a problem? But
Right,
see, we
so
just ignore all of that because you can't ask any
I
questions.
maintain my testosterone levels by lifting weights and jerking off a lot.
Oh, for God's
Just to point out, just a couple of things here. This is where the messaging comes into play because when you talk about networks and all this other stuff, first and foremost, most networks are owned by individuals that lean to the right. For example, and these are local companies. Sinclair is one of the biggest. Stop, look it up. It's a fact. Sinclair is one of the biggest that owns most of the local stations on the
When
East
you look
Coast.
in the dictionary and the definition of gaslighting, it says
Let me
Jacoby.
finish, and then let me finish, and then you can challenge me, or you can try and fact check me and find out that I'm real.
I want to respond to Terry McCain,
So
Jacoby.
again,
Was it Apple, the Apple wife or whoever it was that actually said that they were getting involved in media specifically so they could slant the media coverage and stuff? That was just recently in the last couple of months.
Actually,
go ahead and respond because I want to finish the point real quick.
No, let Adam.
Yeah, I'm
respond.
saying, Adam, go ahead. I want to finish my point right after you do, or whatever you're done.
All right, so I just wanted to respond to Terry McCain. Maybe a relationship to the late John McCain and his wife Cindy McCain, a USC grad and a Kappa Kappa Gamma. Regarding your first question about Elon Musk, yes.
The first question was about the 40% tax cuts, which is essentially a repeat of Kimberly's point.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second. But regarding Elon Musk overseeing agencies that issue grants that impact his business, yes, that would be a conflict of interest. And I think that certainly they will make provisions so that that is not happening. Now, with regard to Trump's tax cuts, number one, they were not the predominant cause of inflation. Inflation was caused by COVID and by the Infrastructure Act that Biden passed. Now, when you look at the tax cuts, there was not a 40% tax cut for the wealthy. The tax cuts were spread fairly evenly across the board between 2 to 3%. And the reason that the wealthy benefited more is because they're paying more into the system. They pay 50% of the taxes, the top 1%. Now, the middle class under Trump's tax cut saw an average 16% savings annually. Those in poverty paid nothing, and those at the lowest end of the tax bracket, it was their lowest tax burden in history. And this was while wages were going up by approximately $4,000 and outpacing inflation. What we got under Biden was an infrastructure act and spending that sent inflation soaring to 9.1%, making housing unaffordable, groceries increasing by 20 to 30%, and gas prices over $3.50 at the pump. The distinctions are obvious. There was no 40% tax cut. The tax cut benefited everybody, and there's empirical data that says it benefited the middle class and those at the lowest end the most.
So just let me finish my quick points again real quick. And also your thing on inflation. Inflation started to spike in February 2021. No bill had been passed by Biden at that time.
Yes, Biden's exacerbated it tremendously.
Wait. I tell you that inflation was spiking in February 2021. That's when the actual spike began. And then you come back with, well, it was Biden's fault.
What was the rate of inflation then?
So the problem with inflation.
What was the rate of inflation then? Was it 9.1%?
Donald Trump is the president-elect, right? Now, what we've just seen since he's become the president, we've seen Hamas say that they want to bring an end to the war. We've seen Russia say that they're open to a peace agreement. We've seen Europe say that they're going to fall in line. The president of the European Union has just said that she would like to purchase natural gas and oil from the United States instead of purchasing it from Russia. So you're now seeing the rest of the world fall in line and actually support the United States. And I don't think that that's because of Joe Biden. I think that's because of Donald Trump.
I know it's kind of funny. So again, as I was pointing out, In February 2021, the actual inflation rate was sitting at 1.7. It then began to spike all throughout of 2021. In June of 2021, it hit a rate of 5%. Then at October, it began to spike again in 2021.
Who was the president?
Hold on, let me finish.
Who was the president?
Adam, stop. You've got to let him show off his Googling skills. Look how amazing it was. He was able to Google stuff and then go, look, this is this number, and this is that number. We're all very impressed by that. You've got to give him a chance to show how amazing his ability is to Google stuff.
It's funny. You think it's clever, but it's not. So you should actually
you're the genius.
You should actually Google the fact that there are plenty of studies on the testosterone and why testosterone levels are dropping. Maybe if you stop following RFK Jr., you'd understand those studies are out there.
So RFK Jr. wasn't somebody who was on the scene when I first brought this up 15 years ago, firstly. And secondly, I didn't say there was no studies on testosterone dropping. I said there was no studies on trials of using testosterone to correct the problem.
You're going to allow. Thank you. So just to point out, as I was saying, starting in February 2021, yes, Biden took office in January 2021. So in February 2021, the spike began. There was no bill on the books in February 2021. That's when the spike happened. As you pointed out, we had a problem.
You said that like five times.
Yeah, and Adam, that's what I'm saying. Yes, you
said that like 5 times.
Again, Shaq, you can please sit back and let me finish. You keep interjecting. We don't have that much time, and I'm trying to allow others to talk. So again, Adam, as you pointed out, yes, COVID was a problem. And when we tried to reopen the country at that time, back in 2021, what was going on? What is a cause of inflation? Supply chain issues, a whole money going out. All this stuff is a problem. And when we opened up the country, there was a huge supply chain issue, and that was still part of
That's
COVID.
correct.
So again, what I'm saying is that when you say that COVID and all this stuff and give a break to Trump on that, but we then say everything about inflation was because of Biden, I have to disagree, because COVID was a problem in there as well. As we can agree, because COVID, part of inflation is supply chain issues.
We do agree. What I disagree with is that you and another panelist on the show have previously said that it's solely attributable to Trump. And I said Trump was not the predominant cause. I didn't say he wasn't a cause.
I did not say that.
Predominant cause, and it was COVID and the infrastructure bill, which set to 9.1% and made life for 60% of people living paycheck to paycheck miserable.
Again,
and then once inflation reared its ugly head, can we go now? You had a fair bit. And then when inflation reared its ugly head, what did the Democrats? Oh, you still need more time. Okay.
Well, Adam and I just had said something back and forth, and we were just trying to. So
what? When Thatcher and I were doing that, you would let us speak. So what gives you the right to do this?
So again, Adam, yes. So we can agree that Trump was not the full-fledged problem around COVID. He was part of that problem. Biden wasn't the full-fledged problem around inflation. He was part of that problem. And that was my whole point with inflation. And that's just a balanced view of that whole thing. And in terms of there were a whole bunch of things. The science thing.
But don't respond to everything. Let us speak.
I'm not answering everything. I'm just saying, Shaq, there have been studies around the testosterone level drops. And that's due to a lot of the chemicals that are getting put into the water, a lot of the feminine products that end up in toiletries and everything else, which have spiked the estrogen levels and also drop the testosterone levels. And that also deals with nature as well. So
okay, thank you for responding to something. Thank you for responding to something that, again, is not what I said. It was a mischaracterization of what I said. I said that there weren't any studies that I'm aware of to test the efficacy of using testosterone replacement in order to solve this issue. I didn't say that there was no studies on the fact that there is testosterone levels dropping and the effects that it has. Now, it's fascinating because the inflation issue in the United States and around the world, yes, a lot of it was to do with supply chains and other issues. However, the question is, what was the government's response? And the government's response in the United States was, let's hike taxes, is one thing that Kamala Harris is suggesting, and two, let's spend more money. And the Inflation Reduction Act was not an act to reduce inflation. And Joe Biden has finally admitted that just before the election, about a month or a couple of months before the election. He said it was really a climate change bill. Yet, When people on the right said this is not an inflation reduction bill, this is a bill to do with climate, we were all shut down and you know, oh, you're just spreading misinformation, you're just hard right wingers. That is again where the problem that Democrats have is that they have lied and gaslighted people so much for so long that now people have no trust in media and they have no trust in the government at all. And that's a real problem, and it's your fault, not ours.
So let me say, most people who work in media, most reporters are left-leaning. Most owners are billionaire right-leaning. The LA Times, Washington Post, both owned by billionaires, both stopped their liberal staff from endorsing Harris. They said, we're just not going to endorse anybody. So that's the situation there. Now with science, I'm okay with a scientific debate. And yeah, I would guess that most scientists are left-leaning. So, and that probably influences some issues. But I don't want to get my scientific debate from non-scientists like Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh.
No, Rick, hang on. Hold up a minute. It's not about the scientists being right-leaning. It's that academia has been taken over by the left. And so therefore, in order to be a scientist, you have to go down this path. This is where the problem. Look, I was just talking to a friend of mine's son the other day, right? He's 15 years old and a very, very bright kid. And I said, what subjects do you not like? And he said, look, I really don't like maths. I really don't like English. And I said, why? And I asked him to just show me how they're taught to multiply. And I was like, no wonder you hate maths. Then I asked him what he's doing with English, right? And English, they were only given two books, a choice of two books. One was about this white rabbit, right, to do with Aboriginal people. The other one was called Stolen Girl, which is to do with the stolen generation of Australia. And the analogy in with these rabbits through Australia was that the rabbits represented the British. I mean, it's this sort of thing. It's very slanted one way, and if you don't, and then you've actually got to say what it represents and what it means and all this sort of stuff. So of course, if you don't give the right answer, you're going to get marked incorrectly. Okay, I asked you about 1984. That's something that I had to read when I was in school. So that's what we're talking about. The fact is that science, you're not going to find many people in science that are able to take the other side, because they either aren't able to actually get the qualifications at university level in the first place, or if they do, they get pressured out of those universities. They get these hit pieces done on them. And Jacoby, I know you're getting all sorts of excited there. You sat there today and go, well, you were having a back and forth with Adam. Yet when I have back and forths with people, you jump in and you say, oh no, you should be able to have these back and forths. So come on, mate.
So let me just quickly say that, hold on, just one sentence. I agree that the things you're talking about, Shaq, are a problem. I don't agree that they're the problem.
And here's the thing. You've now seen people that have become so frustrated that they voted in somebody like Donald Trump. They did it in 2016. They've done it again in 2020. You've now seen people in the UK become so frustrated that they've elected someone like Nigel Farage. It's not a US issue in isolation. You're seeing a move to the right in Germany. You're seeing a move to the right in Sweden of all places, okay? You're seeing the same sort of frustration here in Australia. You've seen New Zealand just get rid of their Labor Party and put the Nationals in. You're seeing Canada is more likely than not going to vote for the Conservatives at the next election. I don't even think Justin Trudeau will make it to the next election. So what are we seeing? We are seeing a trend of people who feel as though they have been ignored. They've been ignored, they've been bullied, and they're frustrated, and they've had enough. And that has to be on the Democrats, because it's the Democrats and the left and the lefties that refuse to ever say, okay, look, maybe you've got a point.
No, quick 30 seconds. No, let me answer that.
I was just going to comment on a couple of things. One, as I said earlier today, Reverend Barber actually said that it was
hi, everybody. Goodbye.
And he's as left as you can get and everything.